All right. Hey there, everyone. So we're just
Hello, hello.
welcome to hi. Welcome to today's APAC best practice webinar. I think we're just waiting for some more people to roll in. Just seeing
Yeah,
if how many folks we got here today.
give it a minute
All
or
right.
two. I
Yeah, yeah.
think we've got some usual suspects starting to come through, which is exciting.
Yeah, no, it's good. I've been actually waiting for this webinar for a while. Yeah, I think most of you will have met me already. Usually if you came in as a customer in the last couple of years, you'll have been onboarded by me. And yeah, it's just over the last, I think, few months, we've had a lot of requests from you guys about having an APAC focused webinar. And I personally was quite interested in being able to run one as well. So here we are. We actually get to do one.
Yay.
Yeah, it's good.
We looks like we might be able to get started. Jane, what do you reckon?
Yeah, yeah, let's have a look. Yeah, I think we got a good amount of people now. All right, so let's get started. Cool. So good day, everyone. So as you guys know, I'm Jane. I'm an implementation consultant here at Gatekeeper. I'm currently based in Adelaide, Australia, although my accent's Canadian. Some of you probably already know that. I'm here with my colleague from over the ditch in Christchurch, New Zealand. He's Mike. He's one of our customer success managers. And we're excited to welcome you to today's webinar on Gatekeeper's best practice workflows. And we're going to show you how to utilize these workflows as well. But I'll just let Mike kind of introduce himself a bit here in case any of you guys haven't met him yet.
Yeah, hi everyone. Kia ora, Jane. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think probably have met most of you by now, but yeah, it's lovely to have you here, and thank you for joining us today. As Jane mentioned at the start, in case you missed it, we're really excited to be hosting this because this is our first ever APAC focused webinar, and yeah, couldn't be happier and more thrilled. Something we've been keen to do for a while now. So yeah,
Yeah.
really great to have you here. And also, because this is the first, we'd love your feedback. So we're going to actually send you out a little, or at least for those who've registered, send you out a little survey afterwards to get your thoughts on this particular webinar, and also on any future sort of ones that we might do to get your ideas on anything that you might want to see in the future. So do let us know. And we've also got one of our hardworking team members behind the scenes today, Mark. He's going to be on hand to answer any questions you might have in the chat as we go, because Jan and I, we love to chat. We'll be too busy chatting with you to get into it, but he's an expert, and so feel free to any questions you got on anything you're seeing today, send them in, and Mark will try his best to answer them as you go. But of course, we might even pick one or two
Yeah.
at the end to share.
Yeah. Yeah, Mark's an oldie. He's been with Gatekeeper for a while, a long while. He was here long before I was. So yeah, I mean, I'm very, very happy that he's on chat today, because he's got a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, that's right. And if you can find something that stumps him, I don't know. We should give a prize out for that, because that would be something.
Just the contest.
Yeah. Um, right. So today we're going to show you how to utilize our four of our most popular best practice workflows, and it's really to help you automate and streamline your vendor and contract processes. So these gems will let you effortlessly add a template of an industry standard workflow to your tenant. And of course, as we roll through the contract, the vendor and contract lifecycle management will demo how easy it is to add these workflows, from vendor onboarding to contract requests and renewals, and even file expiration. These 4 workflows can be the building blocks of your full VCLM process. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, Jane's going to kick things off. We'll pass to Jane, and she's going to talk to you about Gatekeeper's 3 pillars of vendor and contract lifecycle management, or VCLM for short, because these are the bedrock of a successful VCLM system. So yeah, get ready to enjoy the session, and over to you, Jane.
Well, thank you. Thank you. All right. So I kind of wanted to bring everyone's attention to the screen here. Now, this might look really familiar to a lot of you guys if you've been onboarded with us or implemented by us. I'd say probably in the last 10 months or so. So this is our 3-pillar methodology when it comes to basically doing anything at Gatekeeper. In regards to implementation, though, this is how we've broken it down. We've got pillar 1, restore visibility, pillar 2, take control, and pillar 3, safeguard compliance. Now, the first pillar for restoring visibility, this is really mainly about getting your contract and vendor data into your Gatekeeper system so that you have transparency and visibility across all of that data. And also, most importantly, you have your single source of truth. So instead of having your contract and vendor data kind of in spreadsheets, in SharePoint, or just everywhere else in files, now you can actually have all of that information in one system. Okay. And then now we also have our second pillar, take control. So our second pillar is about streamlining processes. So basically vendor onboarding processes, contract management. So streamlining these processes through the use of our best practice workflows. So this pillar is about reducing manual errors and saving your organization valuable time. Now, finally, our third pillar here, safeguard compliance. This is about bringing data feeds in from our Market IQ suite to ensure you actually have real-time analytics on the vendors you work with. So getting that information actually goes a long way towards keeping compliance within your organization, because compliance is quite crucial in the world of VCLM, and it's just not something to be taken lightly. So why are these pillars so important? I've heard people ask before. Now, if you use these 3 pillars effectively, they actually work together to create a really well-oiled VCLM machine. Okay, so enough of the 3 pillars talk. Let's actually jump in and look at some of these use cases and processes. I'll let Mike talk a bit about those.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks, Jane. And that really just sort of sets the scene for where some of these workflows are going to come in, and to really help you with those steps along the way. So just remember too, before we just get into this really quickly, we're really only scratching the surface here. There's a lot of potential with these workflows, and you can do a bit of customization as well. So we do back every one of them up with their own detailed knowledge base articles for your reference, and also to show you how to further tweak it and make changes and make them a bit more specific to your individual businesses. All right, so with that in mind, we're going to start right off with vendor onboarding best practice workflow. And this really is the crucial process that lays the foundation for a robust relationship with your vendors, and ensures that due diligence is performed before contracts are signed. So this is more than just a process, it's the key to restoring visibility to your vendors. And our vendor onboarding workflow really does kick the old traditional pain points to the curb. No more drowning in due diligence paperwork. it really does become your compliance sidekick, and it allows you to glide through regulations like the seasoned pros that you all are. So thinking, the likes of modern slavery laws or CPS 231, health and safety regulations, and so on. It doesn't stop there. And not only that, this workflow also lets you grab all the crucial documents you need from your vendors, thinking the likes of insurance certificates and insurance certificates, ISO certifications, and so on. So yeah, now, of course, we have to touch on the ugly side of inefficient vendor onboarding, messy documents, compliance slip-ups, procurement speed bumps, inefficient onboarding, and the ever-present threat of data security nightmares. But of course, vendor onboarding, our vendor onboarding workflow isn't a band-aid. It's actually the superhero that addresses the root causes and brings structured efficiency to the forefront and allows you to take control of your vendor onboarding. I think we've all, as we've worked with many of you, we've all heard situations where a vendor onboarding processes can and has improved things in this area. So Jane's going to just talk you through now, firstly, how to add it, and then exactly how you can customize some of the features of it. Over to you, Jane.
Yep. Cool. Thanks, Mike. All right. Now on screen here that we're looking at our some of our best practice workflows that we'll be chatting about today. Now, initially, to get to this screen from your tenant when you're logged into Gatekeeper, you simply navigate to the Workflows tab here on the left-hand menu bar. Okay, now some of you may not have access to this function, so some of you might actually click into Workflows and there'll be a message here saying that you don't have access to this. So definitely, if that's the case and you feel that you are supposed to have access to Workflows, please reach out to the Gatekeeper administrators that is at your organization to inquire about access. Okay, now
and it's probably fair to say too, Jane, that some plans as well don't have any included. So if that is the case, reach out to us and we can talk to you about that.
Yeah, reach out to any one of us, or if you're actually in regular contact with your account executive, you can have a chat with them as well. All right, cool. Now let's actually look at how to add one of these best practice workflows. Okay, so very straightforward. There's a green add button here. When you click that, there's a drop down between just a regular workflow, so that's adding a workflow from scratch, or clicking on workflow template. Okay, so now here we've got a good amount of workflows. We've got 9 now, best practice workflows. Okay, so I think just before this month's release, we only had 8. This one's quite new. I really like this one actually. I actually come across every time I have clients that have vendor portal, the question one of the questions will be, can vendors update their own information without having to reach out to us? And my thought was always, oh, that's a bit difficult because they don't automatically have access to that. But now with this workflow, it does show you how you can actually do that. So I did want to kind of call out on that a bit. I know we're not talking about vendor portal in today's webinar, but sorry, update request form, but I was really excited about that one.
And I tell you what, Jen, and for everyone's benefit, this is so fresh that it's only come out over the weekend a few days ago. So we will be sending out some information about the new release very shortly. So look out for that. But this is very fresh. So this is really exciting.
Yeah. I mean, and also it just kind of goes to show that we do releases every single month, and I've been really excited and happy for each time we have got a new release. It's just something that a customer would have asked me about where we previously couldn't do, and now suddenly we can. So I'm like, I'm really excited about this one. Okay. All right, and as you can see, all of these have setup guides that you can click through to. So if you click through to one of them, you'll see here that there's extensive information that you can read through, and there's even how-to videos on how they work. So I find these setup guides very, very helpful. Okay. Now, if you wanted to just add one directly, you would hit create. So I'm typically a hands-on person. I like to actually just personally, I would just load it and then play around with the workflow to see what it does. But the setup guides are quite useful. So I'll load one and then pull up the setup guide to kind of review it side by side. Okay. So let's actually take a look at our first workflow today, though. So we're looking at vendor onboarding. Okay, so your typical vendor onboarding request can either come from employees within your organization or directly from the vendor themselves. So if we click into form access for vendor onboarding, you'll see that there's a few different configuration types for how vendor onboarding requests can be submitted. So our best practice workflow here is currently set up for internal vendor onboarding requests using employee portal. So this means that all internal users registered to your gatekeeper system, your organization's gatekeeper tenant, will be able to click on this button here called submit requests. And from here, request for a vendor to be onboarded. Okay. So when they click request, the best practice workflow form comes pre-built with typical data that organizations collect when onboarding a vendor. So usually you want to know the vendor name, legal name, probably registered address, etc., etc. Okay. So once an internal employee has filled this out, they're able to actually submit this request into the workflow. All right. So if we go back to look at the workflow, I wanted to show you guys how to customize the form as well. So that initial vendor onboarding form, you'll see that there's just some generic information in there. However, if you wanted to collect more information, you can come into the workflow itself, go into form. And if we scroll down the page here a bit, you'll see that there's other information that you can include. So right now, a lot of these sections are hidden. But obviously, if you would like your employees to complete this information, you would make this editable. And if we scroll down even further, as we scroll down the page, you'll see that there's sections for due diligence, modern slavery, risk management, and then CPS 231. So these are just some generic questions that are preloaded into this, that I previously loaded into the system for this webinar. All right, so many of the organizations that I've helped on board in our region have had the need for vendors to submit documentation for review. So things like workers' compensation insurance or police clearance certificate, depending on the type of product or service the vendor is going to be providing. So if that's something that you'd like to add into your form, I'd like to show you very quickly how we would do that. Okay. So let's go through and add a new section. So let's say I would like them to provide, let's say it's an Uber driver that we're engaging for driving service. So we'd like them to provide their car insurance documents. Okay, so we're going to say car insurance, vehicle insurance. All right, so now we've got this new section down here. Going to add a field called vehicle insurance. And under type, I'm going to select attach file with expiry date, because obviously if it's vehicle insurance, normally it would expire on an annual basis. And if you want to remain compliant, or if you want this vendor to remain compliant, ideally you need them to actually update their vehicle insurance on an annual basis. For host, we're going to save this against the vendor, because vehicle insurance is not necessarily tied to a specific contract. It is usually tied to a vendor. All right, so I've now added that field. I'd like to call out here the data type for attach file with expiry date. So this little thing here is actually something that we can use as a trigger in the workflow that we will be talking about later on in today's webinar. All right,
Yeah,
so
just
that's
going to
it.
say, take note of that.
Yeah.
We'll refer back to that in a little bit.
Yep, definitely. But yeah, that's essentially it for our vendor onboarding workflow, best practice workflow. I'm going to actually pass back over to Mike now to talk a bit about the typical process for contract requests.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. That was great. And yeah, so now that we've got this amazing vendor onboarding process in place, and we're going to move along the vendor and contract lifecycle now. And let's just say we've nailed down the vendor we want, and now it's time to seal the deal with the contract. But of course, have you ever felt the chaos of managing contract requests in a haphazard and unpredictable way? The struggle can be real, of course, delays, miscommunication, missing data, and so on. So, I guess, it is quite a common scenario we find, and Jane would probably agree that, often we do come in and ask to help out because a lot of customers do not have full oversight into their contracts, and that's why they get a solution like Gatekeeper in the first place. And this workflow is a great way to streamline this process and get everything in place. So, say goodbye to the lack of visibility in your contract management and welcome a structured and accurate system. Imagine every contract gliding through the same seamless steps and ensuring accuracy, correct approvals, crystal clear communication, and full visibility throughout the process. Of course, contracts aren't just pieces of paper. They're actually the foundations of business. And our template not only sets you up for success with helpful predefined phases, but also allows you to easily add a form full of industry standard questions ready to go. So back to Jane. Now she's going to take you through our best practice contract request workflow. It is a real game changer, I think, in terms of taking control of your contract requests and restores the visibility to your contract records to ensure that all of your contract data is standardized and correct at all times.
Yep. Oh, thanks, Mike. All right, so the contract request form we're looking at here, again, very similar to the vendor onboarding request form. If we look at form access, this form is currently set to be used by internal users within your Gatekeeper tenant. If we click into submit requests, you'll see here that this is a form that they can now click request on. Okay, and you'll see here in this form, this is, again, the form itself is pre-built based on best practices. And you'll see that this is designed to have internal employees complete information about a contract they wish to initiate with a vendor. And once we scroll down the page, you'll see a submit button. Once the request is submitted, I'm going to close out of this, go back to look at the workflow. So I'm going to load this, click on this button here that actually shows on a list of all the different phases a contract request will actually go through. So once it is submitted, it comes in for an initial review. And initial review can be owned by basically anyone that you've configured it to go to. So typically it could be procurement team, it might be legal team or IT team. Once that review is completed, then the contract itself is created, the draft is created, there's a review, and then you've got your red line process using our e-negotiate tools. You've also got your internal red line as well. And then finally, you finalize the draft before publishing it. Again, final approvals, and that's when you actually process e-sign. So e-sign is a tool that's a Gatekeeper's internal tool. So it works similar to DocuSign or Adobe Sign, but it's our built-in tool within Gatekeeper. So after you process e-sign, if all parties have signed, the contract is considered executed at that point. We have a contract rejected phase. So on a typical workflow, contract request workflow, the contract may be rejected at random points. So for example, through red line, or perhaps even at the signing stage where e-sign was actually declined by anybody, that might actually land that approval in contract or that request in rejected. Okay, so this is a typical flow of a contract approval workflow. Now, I did actually want to take you guys through the process of e-sign a bit. So I wanted to show you guys how e-sign actually works. So currently, if this was the first iteration of this request to come through e-sign, essentially the screen will actually say, please start the process. But from here, we can actually go through and edit signers of a pre-existing request for e-sign. But if we scroll down this page a bit further, this is the same screen that you will be looking at when you click on initiate e-sign or start process. So you're able to designate who will be signing this document, and you're also able to add additional signers to sign the same document. All right. So this is our native e-sign tool. And that's pretty much it for the internal contract request that I wanted to show you guys. I'd like to hand it back over to Mike now to introduce contract renewals.
Thanks, Jane.
No
Yeah, and I
worries.
think the great thing about that e-sign, the internal inbuilt e-sign, is that it's unlimited and free as part of the package. So unlike some others out there where you have to pay per envelope or whatever, it's all included. So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. Cool little addition, I think. Okay, so now that we've really worked through and we've seen how powerful the vendor onboarding and contract requests workflows can be, how do we actually make sure that those hard-earned contracts are kept on the winning streak? Managing renewals, of course, can be a bit of a minefield if done manually or reliant on scattered and unorganized reminders. Missed renewals aren't just about dates, they can often be the reasons behind contract lapses, auto-renew clauses, and surprise renewals. The consequences of mismanaged renewals are real. We're talking about potential financial hits, rocky relationships, and the chances for better deals slipping away. Contracts, of course, can be extended, changed, or even terminated, which is why it's crucial to keep rock-solid data in Gatekeeper at all times. This workflow can automatically track and notify stakeholders about upcoming renewal deadlines, based often on contract end or notice period dates, and ensure that proper internal process is followed before a contract is renewed. So back to Jane, who's going to show you how easy it is just to take advantage of this great workflow.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. All right. So as Mike's already mentioned, it's absolutely essential to stay on top of your contract renewals. Missing renewal deadlines can actually lead to financial losses or missed opportunities. But our contract renewal workflow actually helps you and your contract owners stay on top of them.
Mm.
So our renewal best practice workflow actually works off of a trigger. So you'll see this big orange header here that says workflow has a trigger in pipeline, meaning that the trigger is currently not live. So actually, let's click through here to have a look at our triggers. So the best practice workflow comes pre-built with 3 different triggers, and it is quite possible for that all 3 of these triggers would need to be live or in use because each of these triggers are actually looking at different conditions. So for example, end date approaching, this is looking for any pipeline or live contracts with end date occurring in less than or equal to 180 days. The notice period date is looking for contracts that are pipeline or live with notice period date occurring in 90 days. Okay. And finally, we've got our evergreen annual review because as everybody would know, evergreen contracts wouldn't actually have an official end date. So if we click into here, we can actually have a look at the trigger conditions. So
Mm.
it looks for any live or pipeline contracts with an evergreen status. So yes, with the anniversary date, 30 days in advance. So the anniversary date would obviously be the anniversary of the contract start date. Okay. So if you were to have all 3 of these triggers enabled, it would essentially make sure that you have captured contract renewals for all different types of contracts. That's quite important. Um, and again, last thing I wanted to mention as well, you can actually configure what these triggers pick up. So for example, if we look at end date approaching trigger, you'll see here that I've specified this trigger to only pick up contracts that are from Cisco systems. So you can delete this condition, or you can simply add conditions to pick up certain contract types or contracts to do with certain entities.
Mm.
Okay, cool. So I do want to mention that in my experience implementing customers, there can be 2 different types of renewal workflows being implemented. The usual type of renewal workflow is the one that we've included as a best practice workflow. This workflow includes everything. So actually look at the list again. So it includes everything from the renewal review being triggered, the contract owner determining what will happen to the contract. So if we close out of this, I'll show you guys the form. So here it says what action should be taken here: renew, extend, terminate, or nothing. Okay. So what happens to the contract? Let's go back to list of phases here. It includes late response escalation, and obviously whatever choice was made, whether to renew or terminate, it will need to go through an approval. And then we've got the end phases where if they've chosen to terminate a contract, it will automatically terminate it. Finalizing renewal, completed, extended, completed, archive, completed, no action. So whatever information the contract owners update using this workflow is actually going to be saved automatically to the contract record itself. So if we look at one of these completed phases, completed, extended, there's usually an auto action that is enabled. And if we click edit auto action value, you'll see that take value from form is selected across everything. What this is doing is it's actually taking everything that was entered on this form, this renewal form, and saving it in the system against the specific contract record. Okay. So this makes sure, so doing that, having the system save the information actually ensures that your contracts are up to date and still remains your single source of truth for compliance reasons, obviously. Now, if you don't want a full process, and actually quite a few customers or clients I've come across have noted that they don't have a unified single renewal process, so it can be harder to actually incorporate into one workflow. But what they still want is a simple renewal notification process. So basically, if a contract is due to be renewed, if the expiry date is coming up, notification date is coming up, they simply want the system to notify somebody, whether it's the contract owner, the business unit owner, whomever. So if you didn't want a full process, we do have something called a simple notification workflow that can be built from scratch. It is literally just a two-phase workflow. So instead of however many phases you see here, it could be a two-phase workflow where it says, yep, trigger happened, notify this person, and then end. And that'll be it. It's a very, very simple workflow. And that's usually something that I think most of you could build with ease if you're quite familiar with, or if you're a bit more familiar with how workflows work. All right, so that's it for our contract renewals. Mike, do you want to tell us a bit now about file expiration?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think I was actually just reading or just heard actually about a customer of ours in the UK that before becoming a Gatekeeper customer and having one of these in place, they actually found out that they were paying about £1 million a year to in contracts that they didn't actually want anymore, but because they never had a good process in place. And I'm sure, I know I've been and worked in places where that happens and whatnot. So this is great and really, really important, even if it is just that notification, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like forgetting to cancel subscriptions to like all your streaming services. And
I
you
think we've all
realize,
been guilty of that.
except streaming services aren't like millions of dollars.
Yeah, maybe one day we'll have a consumer version of Gatekeeper to help with the subscription renewals. No, that's great. Thanks, Jane. Okay, so file expiration. So now you may recall we did touch on this earlier. So let's give a shout out now to this really often underestimated but really crucial world of files of expiration dates. Not very glamorous, not very sexy, I know, but remember when Jane gave a bit of a mention earlier in that vendor onboarding workflow? Well, we're going to zoom in on this because it is really important. And for many businesses, important files like ISO certifications and insurance policies can be like ticking time bombs. As their expiration date looms, they can just disappear or just slip through the cracks. And of course, for auditing purposes and all of that, it's really important to keep up to date. Of course, there's many reasons why this happens. It may be the lack of a centralized spot for saving them, a bit of forgetfulness, or just people getting busy and the ticking clock. But no matter what the cause is, the outcome is the same. Operational hiccups that can throw your daily grind into a bit of a spin, or even land you in hot water with regulators. And of course, in the hustle of business, we can't be dealing with these hiccups. So Jane's going to now show you just how easy it is to add a workflow that ensures these critical files don't just go missing in action. when the expiration date hits. And here's the cool part. It also can sync seamlessly with our vendor portal, giving vendors a heads up about their documents nearing expiration, or if needed, shouting out to your procurement team internally. You'll see why managing files with expiration dates isn't just about keeping things spick and span. It's about keeping the wheels turning smoothly and steering your team toward success. So over to you, Jane.
No, it's got a bit wordy there.
Oh, gosh, yeah, it's a bit of a tongue twister.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Okay, so on screen here, we've got our best practice file expiry review. So this workflow, similar to the contract renewal workflow, also works off of a trigger. So it doesn't have a big orange banner here because I've actually turned the trigger on. So you'll see here between the two, if it's orange, well, firstly, if it's got a lightning bolt, then you know that the workflow itself has triggers. And if you got orange, it means the triggers are not live. So you might want to have a look at them. But if it's green, it means the triggers are currently live, meaning that you've now have a live workflow in place. Okay, so let's look at the workflow trigger for file expiry. So we've just got the one called file expiration approaching. We click into it, it tells us currently that trigger is looking for files that are attached to the vendor. And that vendor has to have either a live or pipeline status, can't be archived because we don't really need to look at files for archive vendors that we're no longer engaging with. And the file expiry date has to be less than or equal to 14 days. Okay, so this is the current trigger that would fire a file expiration request onto the workflow. So let's look at the workflow here. Right now we've got one request sitting in here from Cisco Systems. Actually, let's go into form access right now. You'll see that the first phase is set to vendor portal. So what this means is the users, vendor users from Cisco Systems, when they log into vendor portal, they'll actually see in their dashboard, they'll see a request for them to actually complete this. And also they would have received an email as well if notification was enabled in the workflow saying that, hey, your car insurance certificate is coming up to be due. You might want to replace it. And it's actually due quite soon. So they might want to actually be actioning that. So obviously if they don't update, if they don't renew their car insurance and tell you that they have, you might be concerned and you might actually want to come in here and perhaps change their vendor status back from live to pipeline, or perhaps even just chase them up a bit. All right. If they were to come in to log into vendor portal and they were able to actually submit the files with a new one before the due date, that will move the request into internal review. So somebody from your organization can look at that and be like, yep, all good, happy with that. And then review would then be set as completed. So that process will be done. So now what happens though if you don't actually have vendor portal as part of your gatekeeper tenant? This workflow is actually still extremely useful. So instead of having the vendor users themselves updating the files, you can actually switch this to employee portal or even having it set to internal and assigning it to the vendor manager that's within your organization. So they would then be responsible. So they might actually reach out to Cisco separately by email or something and say, hey, look, your car insurance certificate is due to be renewed. Do you have a new and updated version you could send me? At that point, the vendor owner would then actually complete this step on behalf of the vendor. Okay, so it is possible to do that. All right. So this is actually a very neat little workflow. And while it's less complex than our other best practice workflows, it's nevertheless an essential process for vendor management for keeping important documents up to date and ensuring vendor compliance at all times. Okay. Personally, it's my favorite workflow because when used correctly, and if you've got vendor portal, it really means that there's not a lot of admin work that you would have to do because the onus would be on the vendor to get their information up to date. Okay, all right. So let's actually head back to Mike now for our wrap up. That's the last of our workflows here that we wanted to talk
Yeah,
about today.
I agree. I agree with you, Jane. And you know, like how often I think I know I've worked in other places before. I've had to chase up insurance documents for various vendors and things, and how much time it takes. So if you could find a way to automate that like that, it could save hours. And of course,
Yeah.
my little challenge to everyone here, or at least those of you that do have the vendor portal as well, and have one of these in place, or are looking to get one of these in place. Sometimes we are set up as a supplier as well, and I know that I've spoken to some of you about getting our insurance certificates and things sent to you. So I'd love to see one of those automations come through from our own vendor portal requesting that to us. So there's a little cheeky little challenge for someone out there to see how we go. Oh, lovely. All right. Well,
Yeah.
there we go. So these are just really some of the key best practice workflows that are really designed to streamline your vendor and contract lifecycle management. And of course, that's just four. We've got now nine, including one that's only just been added in the last week. So
Yeah.
we're adding to these all of the time, and we really are listening to requests that come in from you. And I think, Jane, you'll probably agree, if you do have any ideas on what some future ones might be that would be really helpful, do get them into the ideas forum and let us
Mhm.
know about them.
Yeah. Yep.
Nice,
Sure.
nice. So it's actually really straightforward to add them as well once they're there. And of course, it's not just a concept, it's something that you can actually dive straight into today if you feel inspired. And don't forget, each one is paired with an excellent knowledge base article to help you as well. And of course, there's no harm in just adding it and playing around with it. As long as those
Yeah.
triggers are not live, you can
Yeah.
actually just
Yeah.
play around with the forms and things, and just see what you think.
Yeah. I think with that if you guys are hands-on like me, that's the best way to go. And typically with typically with live triggers or pipeline triggers, I think you might still be able to kind of play around with them a bit as long as you set a condition to kind of narrow it down, perhaps create like a contract type that says testing only and just have that as a condition. But yeah, it's
Good point.
quite fun to actually poke around at them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm very much the same. I was just going me too because I just like to get in
Yeah.
there and play around with things. So
Yeah.
yeah, they usually got me in trouble as a kid as well. But hey, that's the way it goes.
Well,
So
I think the thing about our best practice workflows is that I don't think you could really break them. Um, the bit that you probably want to be make sure of is when you do have turn the triggers on is make sure the notifications aren't turned on. I think by default in the best practice workflows, notifications are off. Simply, no, this one's on. But on the file replacement one is on. But yeah, just make sure notifications are off
good thing to
before you
check.
turn
Yeah.
triggers on. Yeah, yeah,
Otherwise, you might
absolutely.
start freaking out some team members.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, all right. Is it time
Well,
about that time though for I think
yeah, well, I just
open up
wanted
the
to,
floor
before we
for
move on
questions?
to our Q&A,
Yeah.
I just wanted to quickly mention, of course, you know, like you can also get really complex with these if you want, and your business needs might dictate that as well. And of course,
Yeah.
we've got really good guides and everything like that, but of course we're here to help. If you do need help with customizing these or tailoring them to your workflows as well, just give us a shout. But yeah, Q&A time. So Mark's been busy crunching the questions and sorting them out. And I think we've had some really good ones come in, he's saying, so that's great.
Are there a couple that we can answer really
Yeah.
quickly before we
He
let
sent
everyone?
he sent us through looks like a couple here that he said are worth mentioning out loud. So okay, yep. Okay, cool. So this one here, Jane, and it looks like it's to do with vendor onboarding. And the question is, due diligence at our organization for vendors is handled by different departments based on what's involved. Is it possible to have the forms completed by different departments?
Oh, okay. Absolutely. So let me actually share my screen again here. So that's actually a really common question there. So I'm glad somebody asked that. I have onboarded clients in the past that did require due diligence sections to be reviewed by different teams. So the due diligence questions will be filled in by whoever is requesting to onboard a vendor, but then the answers needed to be reviewed by different teams. So if we come into the vendor onboarding best practice workflow, click into the first place, click on the form. We scroll down a bit here. Sorry, I went a bit fast there. If we scroll back up to our due diligence sections, you'll see that the examples that I've added here are actually separated into different sections. So we've got due diligence for finance, legal, human resources, and then operational. So those are your traditional departments. Now, these questions will be answered and completed by the internal requester. However, during an approval phase, onboarding review phase, each of these sections can have custom visibility based on which workflow group. So you might have a finance group, a legal group, or a human resources group. So that's how you would be able to actually kind of, instead of having every team member within the organization review this long list of due diligence answers,
Yeah.
just let them view that particular section. Yeah, so
And that's
absolutely
great
able to do that.
That's great for decluttering as well, to make everyone's job easier. They're only seeing the bits that are relevant to them, and it means that they can just process it a whole lot quicker and get it through to the next stage. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
nice one. That was a great question. Thank you for asking
Yeah,
that.
that was a good one.
Okay, I think we might be able to get in another one really quickly. Okay, here we go. So, who can submit requests into these workflows? Will anyone within my organization be able to request contracts or request a new vendor?
That is a good question. So I know during our webinar or during what we were just talking about, we mentioned briefly about vendor portal and employee portal. Let me just share my screen here again. So we talked about form access and how you can set them to vendor portal and employee portal. So even if you don't have vendor portal or employee portal, you are able to actually create a public URL. Oh, sorry, form access. So public form. if we were to switch to public form, we would actually take this unique URL here, and you can send that to anybody within your organization, and they will actually be able to, so if they click on this now, they can actually access this form right away. They will need to enter their email address to submit the form, because simply we need a record of who this was completed by.
Yep.
So to answer your question, anyone within your organization will be able to request a contract or request a new vendor. If you've got employee portal, they can easily do that using submit requests. But if you don't, they can still do that using a public URL. And oh,
Nice.
sorry, very quick hint here. The email address they submit here ideally should be the same email address they used for registering to your as an internal user. This is so that later on in the workflow, if you've got ownership or notifications set for card creator, in order for the system to recognize a card creator, the system needs to see that email address associated with a user in the system. So best practice when you're using public form, make sure whatever email address they're entering here matches their email address of their account within your system.
Yeah, that
Cool.
makes
I
sense.
hope that answers that question.
Yeah, great. Wonderful. Okay, thanks, Jane. That was great, and thank you again to whomever sent that in. That was a great question.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah. Well, that looks like it might be about it for us today. So thank you for those that did ask those couple of questions, and of course for any other questions that that Mark received during the webinar as well. We really appreciate it, and we really value your engagement with us. So yeah, as I mentioned at the top, you know, just a reminder, if you're watching the if you're watching this on recording, or if you're like me and think in the middle of the night a really great question that you wanted to ask today, you can just send us in a support ticket or message us directly. We'll be more than happy to assist. And finally, from me, I just wanted to give a quick shout out for our first APAC webinar to my lovely co-host Jane, and the entire Gatekeeper team working behind the scenes to make this possible today. But most importantly, even more than that, a massive heartfelt thank you to all of you who've attended today and for being part of our community. You know, your feedback is gold, and it really does make us improve as well. So please do let us know in the survey afterwards what you think and what you might like to see in the future. But yeah, I think that's it, Jane.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Kind of just echoing what Mike said as well. I'd really love for you guys to send in any content that you'd be interested in, because we really enjoyed doing this. And
Yeah,
yeah, I'm really happy that many of you asked for it and pushed so hard for it. Yeah, and I'd like to thank everyone as well for making this possible. And yeah, it was fun to do.
absolutely. Yes. So yeah, thank you from us. And yeah, from me, hope you all have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're joining
Yeah.
us from. Thanks for being here today.